I'm Lauren, Eastwood Hancock's. I'm an OE from 2006, and I thought it would be a good opportunity, although Russell beat me to it, to throw up a picture here of me and the old netball team. I'm the one with the dodgy haircut at the bottom, so that's me in the centre. But it's a real pleasure to be here today, and I'm excited to be talking about a topic that I feel very passionately about, and that is ultimately the employee lifecycle for women and how can you attract, develop and retain female talent in the workplace. And in my career, so I left, in 2006, it'll be 20 years since I started Eltham this September, and I've had the opportunity to meet, work with, alongside and for a lot of very inspirational women. And I have learned from them. I've also, on a very personal note, had a baby 4 months ago. And I've got to be honest and say that a lot of the issues and challenges for women in the workplace didn't really feel that relevant to me until last year. And so it's kind of woken me up a little bit. And I'm embarrassed to say that it took me having a baby to open my eyes to some of these challenges. But I'm hoping to maybe share some of what I've learned in the last year and throughout my career from other female leaders as well today. So we're going to do 3 things today. Hopefully, if I have time to cover the last point, I will. I'm going to talk about my career a little bit, what it is that I do for a living, from sitting here in what used to be my old English literature classroom to being a sales leader today. Second thing, I'm going to really talk about the topic in hand, which is how to attract, develop and retain female talent. And then I thought it might be useful, because I do a lot of graduate interviews, I do a lot of interviews with students, to talk about the transfer of skills from the classroom to the workplace and how maybe you could talk about that if you're ever in an interview. So, I'm going to get straight into it. I'm going to talk about what it is that I do for a living. So, I am a sales director and coach. I work within the sales function at a company called Gartner. Now, sales functions, when I was talking about careers at Eltham College, the word sales never even came up. And if you'd have asked me or told me that in 20 years' time I would be in a sales team, I would have said, you're joking. I don't want to do that at all. But sales functions are really, really important. And I've picked a cartoon here that I show a lot with my teams. And it is showing essentially that without any effort, no matter what product you're selling, no matter how amazing it is, if you don't have a sales team that is actively going out into the market and marketing that product and dealing with customers and getting customers in, you get 0 revenue at the end of it. And so sales functions play a really, really important role. And essentially, there are sales teams that are really broken down into 2 different parts. On the first hand, you have what we call new logo acquisition. New logo acquisition, or business development as it is known, is an incredibly difficult job. And it is ultimately a team who go out and get new customers on behalf of the company. Put your hands up if you or your parents have ever had a cold call. Yeah? Keep your hand up if they've bought something at the end of that cold call. Oh, you have, but you're in the minority, right? It's a very, very difficult job, and that is essentially what my teams are designed to do. So they are prospect-facing. They work with people who are not yet customers. On the other side of the house, you have something called logo retention or account management, and these people are customer-facing, so that is where I work. I am all things customers. Once the business development team have sold a contract, they give it to me and say, can you please look after this customer for the next year? And my team are essentially tasked with getting their repeat business at the end of it. So both roles are what we call revenue generating. They're responsible for getting money into the company. In terms of my role, and you'll see, I think, why I've been asked to do the talk today, my role is to attract, build and coach and develop a top-performing sales team. And I've tried to break it down a little bit into the different kinds of things that I spend my day-to-day on. It's a strategy. Someone once said, and I can't remember who said it, a goal without a plan is just a dream, and I really stand by that. So thinking about how my sales team is going to hit their multi-million-dollar target each year is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. Also, and this is, I would say, a large part of my job, I'm responsible for building a sales team. So thinking about the goal that I have and the skill sets that I have within my team, and thinking about how can we bring people into the organisation either from outside or inside as well. So if you're thinking about somebody who's maybe a top performer in another team, I want them to work for me, because if they work for me, my team will be a top performing team. So it's all about how can I create an environment where people go, I want to work with or for Lauren. Retain and develop, that is very much about continuing to learn within the workplace. So everybody, when they get to work, they don't stop learning when they leave school and university. It's also about what can they continue to develop in terms of their skill sets once they have that on their CV. Customer retention, obviously, is my bread and butter. I spend a lot of my time talking to customers on the phone, but also I'm the person that they get to speak to if ever they have a problem, lucky me. And then finally, careers and best practice. I probably spend about 50% of my role on that. Each year, I'm essentially tasked with finding a problem that we want to solve for that particular year. Maybe we want to become better than we were last year at one particular skill set. I'll go figure out how we can go and do that and then coach it back to the rest of the sales floor. A little bit like a teacher, if you like, but I coach sales teams for different skill sets. So that is what I do. In terms of how I got here, like I said at the beginning, this is not a role I ever thought I would want to be in. I never thought about sales. I landed it completely by accident. So if you're not yet sure what it is that you want to do when you leave school or what you want to do when you leave university, don't worry. I actually applied to probably about 20 different graduate schemes, and I ended up on one at Gartner, and it was the best decision I ever made, even though I made it by accident. And it's very much a structured learning process that you go through, and you get a lot of support along the way and a lot of opportunities to learn from different people. So graduate schemes I can definitely recommend. So now we're going to move on to the main bit of the talk, which I really, really want to talk about because, as I said, I've got so much to say on this topic. I don't know how I'm actually going to fit it into the time that I've got, so I might be breezing through some of these slides a little bit quickly. But before I dig into it, I actually want to address what is now the elephant in the room, which is to say that it is primarily women who take on caregiving responsibilities in families. And that is not just for babies. It might be that somebody has an elderly parent, or maybe somebody or a reason why they need to be at home more. Maybe even, as is sometimes the case with me, I need to take my Labrador to the vet. It is primarily women who take on those responsibilities. And it is impossible to talk about how you can attract, develop, or retain women in the workplace without acknowledging that that is a role that women have. In addition, you can't talk about this topic without setting the background scene for the environment that women work in. And so to do that, I've pulled a couple of articles that are all very recent to set the scene for what women in the workplace is. And the first one is an article from the Times, I think this was February, and it talks about how women are £136,000 worse off in their pension pots by the age of 67. And the reason that was attributed to this is because they take on caregiving responsibilities. They might take a career break to look after children, and that career break is, on average, in the UK, 10 years. Maybe they went back to work, but they took on part-time work, and therefore they took a dip in their earnings. And these are all contributing factors to why, at the end of it, women have a pension penalty. The second thing to talk about is the gender pay gap. Now, this is something that was introduced in 2018. It is essentially mandatory reporting in the UK of all companies above a certain size for how much they pay men versus how much they pay women. Women last year were found to earn 7.7% less than men, and for reasons, according to this report, that were attributed to the previous earlier article. This one's really interesting. Budget of last year, so the current government announcing funding for nursery places in the UK. So as I stand here today, the funding that is available to parents for children who have, for parents who have children under the age of 3 is currently 0. In the majority of cases. That is changing. However, a lot of the funding is very difficult to access currently. So although it's being addressed, it's still not a reality for a lot of women that they can go to work and send their child to nursery. This one's pretty astounding. Childcare costs are actually extortionate. There are very few people, I've got a few nods around the room, there are very few people who know, I think, the cost of childcare in London, but I'll tell it to you. On the lower end, for a full-time nursery place under the age of 3, it's £1,300 a month on the lower end. On the higher end, it's £2,600 a month. Now, we are all stood or sat down in a very lovely private school in southeast London. On the higher end of that scale, nursery places still cost more than sending a student to Eltham College. And I think that is astounding when you consider that there is no alternative for state-funded nursery places. And then finally, before I get on to my main points today, women experience a 34% drop in earnings on average in the first year that they have a baby. But more importantly than that, they never recover those earnings. So hopefully I've shocked you all, and I've set the scene a little bit, but there's one side which is government, there's policy, there's funding, there's childcare allowances. On the other hand, you've got companies and what companies can do and what managers like me in companies can do to make things a little bit easier to encourage women to come back into the workplace and want to stay there. And so to do that, there are two articles that I want to talk about. There is an article from a company called McKinsey. They're actually a competitor of mine, but they do some excellent work in this space, so I thought it was worth putting up here. And there's also another company who I'm sure you'll have heard of, which is called LinkedIn. Hands up if you've heard of LinkedIn. Yeah. So some very, very important companies who've got a lot of good things to say on this topic. So the way that McKinsey decided to talk about women in the workplace is to address the 4 common myths that pervade the workplace that exist about women in work. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the myth, I'm going to give you the reality, and then I'm going to give you my opinion, which is essentially what women can or men can do about it to make it easier for women in the workplace. So myth number 1 is that women are becoming less ambitious. I was astounded when I saw this. I thought, well, how can this even be a myth? Why would it be that people would think that women are becoming less ambitious? But I think it comes from, and I don't know this, but my assumption is it comes from a place where there is an assumption of gender parity in the workplace. And that is not true. For the reasons I talked about earlier, flexible working, childcare, and things like that, it's not always possible for women to pursue the opportunities that they would like to. And so the reality, and according to this particular article, women are actually more ambitious than they ever have been, and that's been proven since the pandemic. What's important is that flexibility in the workplace can enable them to pursue those opportunities. So for example, school pickup, what time do you finish school at the moment? 3:15, 3:55, whatever it is, after school clubs. There is no worker more efficient than a mum who's got to do school pickup. I promise you that. So flexibility might look like logging off a little bit earlier or logging on a little bit later, starting your day before kids have gone to school, coming back, allowing time off for doctor's appointments and things like that. 1 in 5 women say that that kind of flexibility has enabled them to stay in either full-time employment or to avoid going down or to avoid giving up their work altogether. The second myth, hands up if you've ever heard of a term called the glass ceiling. Does anyone know what it means? Anyone? Yeah?
It's kind of hard to explain for women aren't really allowed to make it in the workplace and reasons that I don't really want to talk about, which is why it's called glass ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. You can see it, but you can't attain it. That's brilliant. I think you've explained that really, really well. That's a myth. The glass ceiling doesn't really exist. What actually exists is what we call the broken rung. So if you imagine a ladder and you're trying to get up to the next stage of your career, and then all of a sudden one of them's broken and you fall down. And so what this study looked at is where on that ladder women fall down. And what they found is that it's actually the first rung of the ladder, from an entry-level job to a managerial responsibility where women are not progressing at the same rate as men. So for every 100 men who are promoted to a manager level at the entry-level position, only 87 women are. And so what that tells me as somebody who's in has team responsibilities is that I really need to encourage and recognise the work that is done by my female staff to encourage them to apply in the first place, because maybe there's a lack of applications, and you'll see from some of the things I'll share later on why that might be. Myth number 3 is that microaggressions have micro impacts. Now, a microaggression is essentially something that is designed to demean or maybe dismiss somebody on the basis of, in this case, gender. And they are not always very overtly, obviously offensive. I'll give you an example, because I was actually polling a few of my friends before today, just to maybe support some of the examples here to see, well, in the workplace, what kind of things have you heard? What kind of things have offended you? And one story that one of my friends who actually came to Elton College with me said to me is, I was in a meeting with a very senior male colleague who I'd met on many occasions. I've met them in person, I'd met them online, through teleconferences. And at the end of that conversation, that colleague said, it was really nice to meet you. And he said, well, I've met you many times before. And he said, oh, well, there's quite a lot of you and you're all blonde, so I can't tell the difference. And things like that, which might not, I personally think that's very offensive, but that was passed offhand as something that was very, wasn't intended, I don't think, as a slight, but certainly was taken so. So things like that have a very, very big impact. And what can be done about it? And I think the role of the manager is really, really important. The role of the team is really, really important. When you hear things like that, it's really important to call it out. If you don't say something, could be read or construed that is something that is acceptable. And if you're thinking, especially in a sales team, such as the one I work in a very male-dominated environment, and I want every single person who works in that team to feel comfortable, to feel accepted, to feel like they have a safe space. And also, I want parity between men and women in my team. I want an equal number of men as there are women selling and serving customers. I will only get that if I have a zero tolerance policy for any form of microaggression. And so I think that's a really, really important thing to call out. And the fourth myth, I love this one, because actually there are some surprising things that you can do here as well. The myth is that it's mostly women who want and benefit from flexible working. It is true that women do benefit more from flexible working on account of the fact that they take on more caregiving responsibilities. There's no doubting that whatsoever. However, men and women cite that flexible working is something that they really value in employment, and it's one of the top 3 things that they look for when they are looking for a new job. Now, yes, I can give some flexibility to the women in my team. However, if I think about my team, and I've got, hopefully, in an ideal world, an equal number of men and women working in my sales team, I might have some dads in that team who also probably would like to help their partners take on those caregiving responsibilities. If I can enable the dads in my team or the guys in my team to take off that burden, I'm actually enabling a woman elsewhere, even if it's not in my own company. Also, the intent to stay for those dads, to me and the company and the loyalty that they have is likely to increase because I'm enabling them and I'm providing them with a better work-life balance that suits their personal needs. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an overview of the common myths that there are. Hopefully we've dispelled a few of them. But I did also want to move on to LinkedIn, because they've also got some really quite cool things to say about this as a topic. So LinkedIn looked at, because they have quite a lot of data and analytics based on how people apply for roles on their platform. And they found that women are actually a lot more selective when applying for jobs. And when they looked into it, women feel as though they must meet 100% of the criteria in order to feel comfortable applying for the role. Men, on the other hand, felt they needed to meet 60% of the criteria before going for the role. I think there's a lesson there in terms of how companies might advertise a role. Maybe you don't talk about criteria, maybe you talk about what experience is required or what training might be available on the job to do a role. But I thought that was a really interesting perspective. And when you're thinking about trying to increase the number of women who work in your sales force, for example, I think that's really important to know about. However, once they apply, women are actually far more likely to be hired. Now, I don't think that's surprising on the basis that we've just said that women only apply when they feel they meet 100% of the criteria. So it would make sense that they have a higher success rate when they do apply for those roles. However, it has found that women are less likely to pursue stretch opportunities because they just don't apply in the first place. So they effectively screen themselves out of the conversation. So how can you take this? In terms of companies, they can have policies, they can maybe introduce different hiring criteria and not necessarily list all the different criteria that somebody must meet in order to apply for the role. However, I think it is also very much about encouraging women to apply as well and having career conversations in a very, very different way. I'll give you an example actually, because I manage a number of guys in my sales team, all very ambitious, all very competitive. And I was in a meeting last year. It was a promotion meeting. So I was promoting a member of my team. And in that meeting, he said to me, "When's my next promotion?" And I said, "Well, it's a great question." And I love that question because it shows that somebody's hungry. It shows that they want to know what they can do to get to that next role or that next experience. But I have never been asked that question by any of my female colleagues. And so having that conversation very proactively is also really important, just recognizing that men and women apply for roles in a different way. So 2 more points that I'll make today, and then I'll talk a bit about the transfer of skills if I have time, Louise. Yeah. So hands up if you've ever heard of the term imposter syndrome. Yeah? Hands up if you've ever felt it. Yeah. So we're talking about this in the context of women because the term imposter syndrome originally came about from a study in the 1970s that was done on high-performing women. However, men and women both experience imposter syndrome, but it's characterized, it's a psychological occurrence in which people doubt their skills, talents, or accomplishments and have this persistent fear that they might be exposed as a fraud. Maybe they're not worthy to be here. And the reason this is important is to be aware that not just women, but also men might experience this. And to just think about how you can encourage an environment where people don't feel that anymore. And I think it really truly comes down to how well somebody is recognized. Because people who have imposter syndrome are very, very quick to say, "Oh, it was luck. I didn't do it. I just felt I was in the right place at the right time. It wasn't my fault. Or wasn't attributed to me. I had a great team around me who helped me to get there." And I think what's really important is to recognize when somebody's doing a really good job and to call it out so that they can take the credit and feel comfortable doing so. Because sometimes, although teamwork is great, if you've done a really good job, you should be recognized for that really good job. And the second thing that I wanted to talk about is what we call the chameleon effect. Has anyone heard of the chameleon effect? No? Anyone guess what it means? Yeah?
Would it be like if you change how you are to set it in?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It is an unconscious, you don't realise it's happening, mimicry of other people's behaviours, actions, or traits that mean that you fit in a little bit better. Now, in the context of women in the workplace, this is so important, especially in male-dominated environments, because if you have a meeting, and maybe I'll give an example, make one up. Got 9 team members in a team, got 1 woman. In the team meeting, you're all talking, how was your weekend? Yeah, it was great. What was the rugby result? Oh, I played golf. Oh, which course did you play on? What team do you support in football? And I'm to talk for myself here, because I do appreciate that some women do like football and rugby or golf. I don't. I have got nothing to say on those topics, nothing wrong with it. But I don't have anything to say. However, I have heard colleagues in the workplace who maybe start to look up the results before their Monday team meeting so that they can actually be part of the discussion. And so when you're thinking about women in the workplace, or even men in the workplace, if it's a very female-dominated environment, it's about always being aware of the things that you're talking about so that you're not excluding somebody from the conversation on the basis of common interest. Because you never want somebody to not be their authentic self at work, and to be able to feel comfortable, essentially, people need to feel part of the conversation. So I'm conscious that a few of you might need to leave in a minute, but before you do, I'm going to squeeze in a very quick 2 minutes on what I'm going to call the transfer of skills from the classroom to the workplace. If you do need to go, I won't take offence if you need to get up and leave. But one of the things that I said at the beginning is that I do a lot of graduate recruiting, I have done in my role, and very few people who come to me in an interview as a graduate or even as a student know how to talk about their experiences at Elton College or the schools that they've been to in a way that sells their skill set. They might come to me and they might say, I was part of the rugby team, I was part of the netball team, I was part of the school musical, which this year is chess. I was a prefect. I I did English literature, maybe. And so what I wanted to focus on is just thinking about the skills that underpin those subject areas and think about how you can sell those subjects. And I'm going to go through just the academic ones, and then I'll pause so that people can go to their lessons. And I just want people to think about, when it comes to a career in the future, how does the things that you do at Elton College link to what you want to do in the future? And I've taken humanities subject. This is actually my Elton College CV, by the way. This is all the things that I did at school. And I did English literature, French and drama. If you think about my role today, I'm a sales director. English literature, I have to be very articulate. I have to pitch customers who might not want to buy my product. I might have cold called them. They might not want to speak to me. And in 20 seconds, I've got to tell them why they should take my call and give me 2 minutes. French, I study French. You have interpersonal skills. You have to have the ability to converse and communicate in a different language. And drama, you have to be very confident at public speaking and to be able to present. I wanted to make the point that, if you do have, there's so much opportunity here at Elton College that honestly differentiates students, because not everybody has the kind of experiences that are on offer here. And don't undersell yourselves. And so if you've got students or if you are putting your CV together, just think about the skills. Don't think about the experience. Just think about what you've learned and how that could be a transferable skill.